listening to Unpause Your Life with Dr. Cali Estes and Master Coach Jenny Fontana, founders of the Life Coach Method. Each one of our uplifting and deep dive episodes is geared to help you tackle the things that hold you back from having the most magnificent life you deserve. Sit back, relax, and prepare to be coached.
Hey, Mike, how are you?
I'm doing good. Yourself?
Good. Where are you right now? What part of the world are you in?
Cold New York City.
What's your temperature?
It, it starts with a 5.
Oh, it's so nice here. Since I came to LA, it's been like 80 degrees. I've been so happy.
Yeah, we're looking forward to that.
Yeah.
I just played the Tampa this weekend, so I felt those 86 degrees.
Oh, how was your show?
Yeah, no, it's great. I mean, it's just playing songs I wrote 40 years ago.
That's so cool. Are you back? So you're back touring the US again?
Yeah.
Awesome. Are you full band or is it just you?
Yeah, that's a full band, but for like next week I'm doing 4 solo shows. But I go in between where some places have just space for solo shows. Other places, bigger places, we do a lot of casinos, a lot of festivals. That's a full band.
Oh, wow. Very nice.
Yeah.
Now you're stateside full time, right?
Well, so far this year, is how it's going to be, and I mean, whenever we can, we go overseas and Asia and stuff like that. But we got a lot of work in the U.S. this year.
Very nice. Okay. Very cool. And you got married, right?
That I did too.
Congratulations. Very nice. Very cool. Well, as you know, we're making this crazy movie about addiction. Kind of to honor my husband, and you knew my husband, the rock and roll drummer, and we're talking about addiction and mental health. And Peter's here from Porno for Pyros. Have you met Peter from Porno for Pyros? And
I
Psychedelic
don't
Furs?
remember that.
So Peter is, I'll let Peter DeStefano meet
Hi,
Mike Tramp.
Mike. Nice to
What's going
meet
on,
you.
Peter?
Good to meet you. Yay.
Likewise.
Yay.
He is the guitar player for Psychedelic Furs now as
Oh,
well.
okay. Well, there you go.
Yeah, the furs and porno.
Kick ass.
Yeah, well, nice to meet you.
Likewise.
Yeah, cool.
Happy
Cool.
to be part of this.
Yeah,
Yay. Cool.
thank you. That's all I
Okay,
needed. Off you
okay.
go.
Nice to meet you. See ya.
We're done. Okay. So I didn't know if you wanted to talk about your brother at all. If you don't, that's totally okay.
You listen, you know me, I just tell the truth about anything that I'm being asked. So there's nothing that, that I can't talk about and that I don't want to talk about.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you for writing the foreword to my book, my second book, I Married a Junkie, which kind of chronicles my husband's downfall into fentanyl and eventual death because his body just gave out. And I know you have a brother that had some issues as well. Um, how are things been since kind of all that went down and he passed away? How have you been?
Well, I mean, it wasn't a surprise. It's sort of like they say, shouldn't Keith Richards be dead by now? It's just one of those. I mean, we would probably have thought it would have happened, maybe 20, 30 years earlier on when you start messing around with that kind of stuff. And sort of just at the end, the body just gave in. It wasn't to an overdose. I think it was just a lung cancer from being a heavy smoker, a heavy hashish abuser, all during your life being yeah, like a 60s guinea pig, and so I mean it just took its toll. And it's sort of almost kind of like, gently he just went into that good night. So and he was actually okay when he took his last breath with that. He had lived his life on the edge, um
Yeah.
serrated knife, and he was not bitter about it. It was just the cards he had been given.
Yeah. No, I understand that. That's kind of what happened to Tim. He had 29 days sober when he died, but his body was so messed up from fentanyl and crack and just, so many years of that, your body can't sustain living at the level it is when you keep putting those amounts of drugs in your body.
No, like being the absolutely total opposite of any people, abusing themselves, alcohol, cigarette smoking, drugs, etc. I've always found it, quite interesting of how I chose or how I naturally chose this way. I grew up in a full smoking home. I grew up in a very rough neighborhood, alcohol number one in Copenhagen, Denmark in the 60s. It has always been around me. Later on, when I got into rock and roll, and especially when I got to the U.S. in '82, I mean, that was a time of cocaine and stuff like that. I mean, it was just right in front of me, and I was never drawn to it. And later in my life, I realized that my body so wants to fight anything that's not naturally or natural come, entering me. So it instantly puts up a wall and the defense system that, I mean, it's almost like it wants to do that if I take a vitamin pill. And so I would guess I was just born that. So being on the other side, viewing and both seeing my brother who toured the world with me, and of course instantly would find the bad guys around the venue and so on. So, I just always found it interesting how two people who came out, from the same mother, just were so completely different. And we just, we walk down that line, just completely heaven and hell.
Yeah. And that's the argument for nature versus nurture, because you guys came from the same genetic cloth, but he's a completely different person than you were chemically, like metabolically. So his body's craving that type of drug, or it works well with his system where it doesn't with yours. That makes perfect sense.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I could become an addict to oatmeal cookies, but the second the waistline would be messed with, that would naturally stop there. I mean, so that, like I'm talking about, without thinking about it, it's a built-in system.
Mhm.
And also interesting enough, at least I think it's interesting. The same thing goes with now, this year as I celebrate 50 years in rock and roll, because I started at age 15. I have the same thing, the same defense system, being a singer, that sort of as an athlete, I know that if I don't protect it, it it'll give me problem tomorrow or the day after, and I'm not willing to pay that price. Once again, I've toured with the greatest. I've seen many people abuse. I've seen many people not being able to do the next day show. And with that, there's almost a fear in me that stops me from ever testing that. So, it's early to bed, at least it's earlier than the rest. And so it's just the way I am, and the way I became, and the way I sort of live that life in rock and roll, where I probably should in reality by now been, like sit out on pasture.
Yeah. Well, you've seen it. Sometimes when people see it so much around them, and you started so young in the industry that you actually watched everyone around you. I mean, back in that day, cocaine was everywhere. Everywhere. Everybody had it, and you decided that's not what I want because you got to see it that young too. So that makes a big difference in your mind when you step back and say, all these people around me are using it, and some of them are dying, and some of them can't play. If you're that messed up, you go on stage, you sound awful. And in your mind, you sound great, but you really don't. So you got the ability to say, I don't want that, which is awesome. That's really hard.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, and the same thing goes for alcohol. I think that I'm blessed in the way that I really can enjoy two cold beers and really enjoy the craftsmanship of a beer, and then not go for the third.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's rare.
You know, where both my brothers would just go till the lay on the floor, and I don't want to pay that price. So there's just an instant, like wall again coming up and saying, okay, that was it for you. You really enjoyed that, and so like that. I was fortunate enough to have been able to tour with some of the greatest giants of rock and roll. And without naming names, one of the big ones, who had become a good friend on the road, said to me, and he was clean on that tour, coming out of long ass abuse. He said, "It's not that I can't enjoy a beer or a glass of wine with you, but once I have that first one, I'm going all the way.
Hmm.
I'm going all the way, and that's it. And that is what I know. So therefore, I can't join you."
Yeah. Well, that's good that he knew his limitations and he knew what he could and can't do. A lot of people forget that. They forget what their limitations are and they say, "Well, if you're going to have a drink, I'll have a drink with you." And whereas you'll have one or two and you're going back to the tour bus, he's going to end up in a back alley somewhere, probably getting arrested and not make it to the show the next day. So he knows his limitations, which is it's hard for most people to be able to recognize that stopping point and say, "This is okay and this is not okay for me." And a lot of people never get there. They keep trying to toe that line and they can't toe it.
Definitely. Definitely.
Yeah.
I've seen it. Yeah, I've seen it. I've lived it. It's just the way it is. These days as you go out there, and at times it's not every day and it might not even be every week, but sometimes you are sort of a role model to a younger generation who is misguided by so many different things in life, especially with the ability to go on YouTube and then seeing everything you choose you wanted to see.
Yeah.
What can you say to them? So I always try to give them, not my success, but the reason why I didn't become a failure. In knowing the trapdoors. I mean, it's equivalent to we didn't know any better when we signed the contracts. We didn't know any better when we spent all the money because we had left school early. We had given our life, and like I said, I've now given it for 50 years to rock and roll. So I paid a price there. Now I sit with not necessarily a castle or a vault full of gold, but I sit with 50 years of something that most people will never see in 100 lifetimes. And that to me, is actually the reward.
You're a legend. You're a legend in the rock and roll space, and you created a whole legacy, which is way better than a pile of money any day. Because people know who you are, they know what you stand for, they love your music. I mean, you're an icon. So it's just awesome. I think it's awesome for what you've done and what you've been able to accomplish in 50 years. That's a lot.
It sure is. It sure is. But like again, I mean, it requires almost too much discipline, and that's always again fighting a angel and devil about, well, you shouldn't really be this together in this business, man. People would like a little bit of chaos and a mess and stuff like that. And I've said it so many times, I wasn't made for this business, which is also maybe probably why I somehow survived.
True. That's very true. We lost a lot of legends way too young
Oh,
because they partied too much.
exactly. And I understand it when I'm in it, and I see it, and I know it. And I was thinking about that sometimes when you see people coming up, and almost like the second they reach the success and they're introduced to this other world, not necessarily abuse, they s- they weren't made for that. They don't know how to handle that. It's just it's a sports car with way too much horsepower under the hood. And bing, now into the wall.
That's a good analogy. I like that. I'm going to use that with my clients.
Yeah,
You're a
you
sports
get
car with too much horsepower. I like it.
Yeah, I was just thinking about some of the things I see that some of the celebrities get into them, and you go, man, 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 man,
Yep. Buying all kinds of stuff, Rolexes, Lamborghinis, mountains, all the things they don't need just because that's their new addiction is buying stuff.
Yeah, yeah. I sometimes wonder what it replaces.
Hmm.
Why? I mean, you start out, learning your instrument, then hopefully you're good enough that you can write a song, and that song is a song that people like. And then it's sort of, the train gets more and more cars, and it goes down the track. Then this stranger comes along of now you're supposed to act and do something different because you are now known. I don't really like the word celebrity because there's a lot of celebrities that have no talent, so let's just stick to artists. And for example, country music seemed to be a place where at least you get the sensation that people don't change from who they were back home, and they might have picked up that guitar and that tone and the way of singing very early on because they were in that environment where a lot of homegrown country is a part of your life, your family, etc., etc. But you somehow are able to continue with being who you are along the way. And I know I am like that. I've always had a problem playing the visual rock star off stage. When you go out on stage and the lights and the roar of the crowd and all that kind of stuff, it's kind of like a given. That's what you are. You're like 6 feet above the rest of the audience, and you're the one everyone looks for. But on Thursday, when you go to when you need, to go shopping and Walmart is where you're going, you don't want to be that rock star. At least I don't want, and that's just very natural for me to be that because, the person on stage is just a show I do, and I'm dressed up a little bit more than when I build a deck in the backyard. But I am the same person, and later on in life and when we met, when I toured the world with an acoustic guitar and played a lot of holes, where the stage was not 6 feet above, but somehow on the floor in the corner. When you are the same person, there's no problem fitting in there, and the audience sees that and hears that instantly. Now, if you weren't able to deal with that, you would really, really have a hard time. I remember it's not the world's greatest story, but I knew the first time I went out on the road, just being me, traveling with my guitar and driving, a rental car. I knew there weren't going to be a backstage entrance. I knew that I would have to get through the audience to go on stage. So it became part of the show. It's always been my stories. I like to talk about real life. And then after the show, I'd walk down from the stage and I opened two suitcases with CDs and vinyl and sell t-shirts. And the audience loved it. Can you do that when you play for 10,000 people? No. Then it's a completely different thing. But most of the time, I am the person in the rental car playing on the stage that's only a foot above the ground. So that's where my life is, and that's where I actually is most at home because I can be me and I don't have to change.
And that's rare because most artists that get to the level that you're at, they get addicted to the fame. They get addicted to the lifestyle. They want the people to come up and then they start shunning their fans instead of interacting. Like you're very interactive. You take photos with your fans, you're selling the CDs, you're there. You're part of the whole thing, which leaves your fans with the memorable side of how human you are. A lot of artists get to the point where they're not human anymore. It's this big show, it's this grandiosity. And then what happens is when they're going from, 300 people to 3,000 to 300,000 on stage, and then it slips backwards and they have maybe only 100,000, they start to say what's wrong with me. And then they start to turn to drugs and alcohol because they're not as big as they were. So that's why I think you're so consistent. It's not just your sobriety, it's how you built your whole brand, which is the human connection, which is the opposite of addiction. Addiction is the opposite of connection. So that's the cool thing about it.
Yeah, and I've met too many who can't deal with that and see
Yeah.
that, and I'm sometimes wondering if what you would call that, but of course that to me is probably what I'm most grateful to is accepting. I mean, it at the same time, it's not really that hard. I come from a 1.5 bedroom apartment. We never owned a car. My dad left when I was 5 years old. My mom worked in a bar and raised three boys. We never had anything, but we had everything.
Yeah.
And so it's not that hard to look back and saying, but man, you functioned well when you opened the fridge and it was empty and we had a sink with cold water and we could only shower at school or at sports events. So it's not that hard to adjust to, well, there's no dressing room backstage. Okay, well, I'm going to dress at the hotel or something like that or whatever. Or, I'm not even going to dress. I'm just going to go in and just. And I feel sorry for a lot of people that ends up that place, where you almost can't function if you aren't someone more than your next door neighbor. And I don't know where that category is becomes a category because you aren't more than your neighbor. You're
Yeah.
just because even though you have sold 1 million albums, doesn't really make you more than anyone else. It's just that you just happen to be the one that now has to file a larger tax return and all
Yeah.
the other things that comes with that. And life can be a little bit more complicated if you choose to be, but there also are people, and I admire them, and they become my role model that just doesn't change and still are able to sort of do the way, because I do see, and I've seen it through my heroes and my mentors and the books and the documentaries and all that stuff, that there are people that probably wouldn't have gotten any further if they hadn't chosen music, because it became the way of talking and the way of expressing themselves. But now they're in this world, and now comes all these other temptations and invitations to
Yeah.
parties you shouldn't go to.
It's a lot. It really is a
It
lot.
is a lot. It's a lot. And and another thing is that the chase is better than the catch for
Mhm.
me. The brotherhood, the fight in the beginning of just making to a show. Then you succeed. Now you have separate dressing rooms. Now you don't talk to each other. You have four different managers. You have four different tour buses. I mean, of course, if you can afford it. And you go, well, I thought when we made it, we would be together and we would celebrate and not fight each other with lawyers and stuff like that. So it's like, why would you want to make it?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And then everybody's mad at everybody, and then people are quitting, and then you have to replace them, and then the fans don't want a replacement. They want the original. It's a lot, and it goes from fun and artistry to a business. And when it does that shift into business, that's when people start to fight, because now we have to tour, we have to play, we have to do these things. It used to be fun. We were making music and hanging out, and then things go wrong, or you have somebody that starts using drugs and alcohol and really ruins the band, and you can't pull them out of it.
No, exactly. And your advisors coming up from the bottom and the ones you surround you with are looking just as much for the payoff
Yep.
as you somehow seem to be looking for. So their decisions or their guidance will be towards what can make more money and not what is the right song, what is the right video, what should we do, and should we have take a year off, etc., etc. And of course, as I sit here and talk to you and tell these stories, it's all based upon all my mistakes. I didn't know any of this when I started.
Yep.
So I can look back and it's crystal clear that the GPS that I followed was really, corrupted.
Yeah.
But then at the same time, you're simply not strong enough to say no. So I mean, we're talking about addiction. It's another form of addiction. So it's like, well, we also want to be successful, instead of saying, no, we're just going to stick there and we're only going to play for 250 people for the rest of our life. And we only want to sell 1,100 albums. I mean, nobody obviously can say that kind of statement.
Yeah, you're right. We are almost out of time.
Thanks a lot, Cali.
Awesome. Thank you.
care.
Have a great day.
You got it.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Unpause Your Life with Dr. Cali Estes and Master Coach Jenny Fontana. Head over to www.thelifecoachmethod.com to learn more about coaching yourself and how to become a master coach.